Hi, and welcome to The Fitness Doctor on ESPN 730, the program where we address your exercise, nutrition, and overall health needs. My name is Troy Press, the Jesse Pinkman of the show, and now an exercise physiologist in the School of Sports Sciences at Wingate University, the Fitness Doctor, or I would like to call him Walter White, Dr. John Acquaviva.
Thanks, Troy. I'm always not sure what he's going to say in the intro, but that was a good one. Today our topic is common injuries, in particular those that are more likely to occur to people who are active, athletes, recreational athletes, and just simply those who exercise. We're going to talk about specifics about the injuries themselves, and it's actually going to be a two-part program, and we're going to eventually get into treatment, how to prevent them, and so forth. Troy, what's in store for us today?
All right, Doc, this segment's rundown is we have a special in-studio guest. Eric Wikstrom is in the building. We always have the quick Q&A with Dr. A, the social media breakdown, and fitness nuts in the news.
A bit more about my guest today, Eric Wikstrom. He's an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology at UNC-Charlotte. In particular, Eric is an athletic trainer, which means he knows everything injury and the prevention of them. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Quick commute here, I take it?
Yeah, quick commute, actually. No problem getting down here.
A little bit about Eric. We've actually known each other for a long time. My first job was at Roanoke College, and Eric was an undergrad there, and he was about 18 or 19 years old in his first class he took me for. And in fact, right after I met him, and just the look on his face, I realized, even though I had just earned my PhD, he was smarter than I was. But now he's gone on. Since he left Roanoke College, he's earned his PhD, and I think he's going to be a great guest today because he knows all things injury. A little bit more on our topic of the day. Men's Fitness, a popular fitness journal, recently listed the most common fitness-related injuries, and we'll talk about some of them, provide a little anatomy and physiology, and help our listeners prevent these injuries from occurring. And along the way, we hope to hear from those folks. Before we move on, Troy, the social media info.
Yeah, Doc, if you guys want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, we keep it real simple here. It's Woo Fitness Doctor. That's W-U Fitness Doctor. Or feel free to reach out to us via email at woofitnessdoctor@wingate.edu. You know what that means, Doc.
I love that sound.
It is now time for the quick Q&A with Dr. A. This is part of the show, my favorite part of the show, where I throw a couple questions at the doc, and he answers them. So, Doc, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's
get to it. Number one, is there a difference between a sprain and a strain?
There is. These terms rhyme with one another, and because they do, I think often people get them a little confused. A sprain is actually damage to a ligament. Either it's overstretched or it's actually been torn, whereas a strain has to do with a muscle or a tendon. Little anatomy and physiology there, but yes, they are different injuries.
Question number two. Does obesity or being overweight have anything to do with being injured?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the reasons I like to address stuff about obesity is because 67% of our nation, as I mentioned on previous programs, and all of our listeners remember that particular percentage, but 67% are either overweight and or obese. And this is, of course, leads to a lot of different issues. And the more weight that we carry around, especially if it's non-purposeful weight like excess fat weight, it puts a little more impact on the joints of the body, at the ankles, at the knees, and it's just more likely that those structures are going to give out. So no doubt about it.
Cool. Question number three. Are knee injuries more common now than before?
That one's tough to say yes or no to. Eric may have some response to that a little later when we talk about knee injuries in particular. But it probably seems like that just simply because of what I call the bottom line. And that is when we watch ESPN TV, there's that bottom line. And no matter what the program is, and it gives us the update on trades, on games upcoming, injuries, and so forth. And often when they talk about those injuries, it talks about exactly what structure has been injured on that individual. And probably because of that bottom line alone, it seems like knee injuries are more prevalent. But my guess is because of the nature of hitting in football in particular, there may be a higher incidence. But we'll come back to that, all right? All right.
That was a quick Q&A of the day. And now, back to the doc.
Okay, again, if you're just joining us, my name is Dr. John Acquaviva. In studio with us is Dr. Eric Wikstrom. We're talking about common injuries, in particular those that are common to those who exercise regularly, those who are athletes, recreational, professional, collegiate, whatever the case is. And this Men's Fitness Journal, it listed the top injuries just ones that are more likely to occur to people who are, I think, recreational athletes. So we're going to go down this list and over the period of a couple shows, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. The one that they had number one, Eric, was plantar fasciitis. Now, this is the bottom of the foot. It's a ligament that attaches from our heel bone to some of the smaller bones in the front part of our foot. And this just becomes overstretched or inflamed. What's the background on this?
Yeah, that's basically exactly what happens. So it stretches when we start to bear weight. So when we start walking, and especially when we push off,
Sure.
It takes on more and more stress.
Got it.
And over time, that can give out, especially when you talked about people who are overweight and obese. That puts more pressure on it. And as it starts to stretch over time, it becomes inflamed, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
And for instance, when people walk, there's pain in the bottom of their foot, right?
Yeah, a lot of times the classic symptom is it hurts really, really bad when you first get up in the morning. That first step you take out of bed.
Before this ligament has actually been stretched and warmed up, and so therefore any movement is going to make it hurt.
That's right. Yeah, because your foot's typically it's flexed and shortened when you sleep at night.
That's right.
So when you take that first step, it stretches
and elongate
out, and
it.
hurts
Yeah.
really bad.
Now let me ask this. This was number one in this list. If I asked you, now you've been studying this for a long time, close to 20 years now, right?
Not quite that long.
Well, sorry, but
I'm not that old.
Yeah, well, you started as an undergrad, 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you've been studying this. What would you have said is the number one injury?
I would have put ankle sprains probably first and foremost. If you talk about
For people that recreational athletes, people that just
a lot of people just sprain their ankle jogging down the street. They take a misstep, step off a curb wrong, and over it goes.
And of course, also with people who everything from play 5-on-5 basketball or basketball with their buddies to collegiate athletes to the recreational athlete, you'd put ankle sprains number one.
Yeah, based on the data that's come out, the epidemiological data, ankle sprains are number one injury.
Now, if you had to list the top 10, where would plantar fasciitis? This is just informal, of course.
Yeah, no, I'd say it's probably up in the top 10. Lower extremity injuries to the leg and the foot and the ankle are always going to be at the top because that's always happening every time you take a step.
Right. And of course, it's more weight bearing. Obviously, our shoulders, our elbows, they go through repetitious type movements, but it's not quite the same thing, right? Where there's weight bearing or whatever the case is. All right. And next on the list was ankle sprain. So I know this is in particular, it's a particular interest of you. You've published a lot of research articles based on this. Let's talk about the basics of anatomy in this particular injury. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can sprain your ankle. The main one is when when we twist our ankle and we kind of turn the outward portion out, right? What's the best way to explain that to the everyday
your
listeners?
healthcare providers are going to describe it as an inversion ankle sprain. So you're rolling your ankle, and that's what you're going to typically see. Most people, if you say roll your ankle, they're going to kind of get it. But yeah, that's the most common. It's about 90% of all ankle sprains.
Is that right? 90%. Now, this is in particular, it's what's called the calcaneofibular ligament. Did I have that right?
That's correct. So that's one of the three ligaments that are on the outside of your ankle.
And when you have an ankle sprain, that just may be one of them. But I thought that was maybe one of the
That's
main
one of
ones.
the two primes. So that one, and then there's another one called the anterior talofibular ligament. So those two are the ones that are most commonly sprained.
Got it. Now, when this happens, 90% of all injuries take place to that particular area. What happens is those ligaments just become badly stretched, or is there even a slight tear in it most of the time? What's the most common thing with the ankle injury?
Any and all. Depends on the person you talk to. So they could be, some of the fibers within that ligament can get stretched out or torn. And in very severe cases, the entire ligament can be completely ruptured, much like people might think of with an ACL tear.
Got it. All right, if you're just joining us, this is the Fitness Doctor on ESPN 730. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva, exercise physiologist from Wingate University. Troy, give us that social media info again. And I think somebody's contacted us about today's show, correct?
Yeah. If you guys want to reach out to us via social media, it's real simple. Woo Fitness Doctor. That's WU Fitness Doctor. And we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and always feel free to reach out to us via email, woofitnessdoctor@wingate.edu.
You never get tired of saying that, do you?
I do not.
Do you wake up in the middle of the night? Woo Fitness Doctor.
Oh, always. Oh, woo, woo, woo. All right, so we got a question here now from John in Charlotte, and he wants to know what causes muscle soreness.
Causes muscle soreness. I would put this on one of the, this would definitely be in the top 10, right? I mean, how many people have come to you and said, my muscles are sore, or I can't move because of what happened yesterday, whatever?
All the time. They start working out or being active, and you get sore.
That's right. And a little bit of the physiology behind it. Muscles are made up of actually literally dozens of things, but some of the protein, what are called the contractile components, these guys go through microscopic tears. And when they go through the microscopic tears, for instance, when we, let's say we do bench press, or we do a push-up test, or we do some type of running, maybe back and forth, like say full court basketball, the muscles are being put in a range of motion that they're not used to. And the muscle actually goes through what would be considered a first-degree strain.
Yeah, in many
but
cases.
It's microscopic,
It
isn't
is.
Yeah.
But they need it. They need that too, because when they heal, that's when you get stronger.
That's right. And the next time they work out, it's probably less likely to happen. And that muscle probably is just slightly stronger at a microscopic level after maybe one time.
That's right. Which is why when you continue to work out, you have to put more and more resistance on the muscles to continue to see more benefits.
And interestingly, you actually want to feel that soreness, because that means some rupturing is taking place at a microscopic level, and that means there's going to be some growth as a result of that.
That's right. But the soreness comes in when you do too much too early, and your
That's
body's
right.
not used to it, and you can be just in aches and pains for a couple of days.
And the worst part is that people stop as a result of that, which we don't want them to do.
That's right. 'Cause as soon as you stop, you take that extra week off to sometimes let it go that long. You start up again, and it happens all over.
And then sometimes people take a year or two off too.
That's right.
And then they're added to that 67%. All right, we're getting near the end of this portion of the show. Troy, we're going to switch gears. What do we got?
It is time for Fitness Nuts in the News. All right, so we're taking a different approach to this part of the show today. We usually talk about people doing something a little bit nutty, but as you guys know, the show called The Biggest Loser, I was doing some research, and Rachel Fredrickson, she began the show at 260 pounds.
She was light.
She was light.
Right? Some people are like, well, beyond that, right? I'm not a big fan of the show.
No,
but
that's true.
Okay.
She stands at 5'4", and she has now
Well, maybe not so light.
She has now shed 60% of her body weight, and puts her body mass index at 18%, which is below
at 18, actually, not percent, but at 18. Yeah. So in other words, she's lost a great deal of weight, amazing amount.
Right, which is below the National Institute of Health considers a healthy minimum, which you know more about than I would.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was funny because when I was looking at it, they had a picture of Jillian Michaels and the trainers there, and their faces when she came out was so shocked. And people are saying she's lost too much weight. So, Doc, what do you think about this?
Interesting. Yeah, I think the whole thing about The Biggest Loser, they may be fitness nuts as a group, but what this one is about is that she just simply went too far in the weight loss, and then now she's gone from one end of the spectrum of being unhealthy to the other end of the spectrum. And 18 on a BMI reading is actually extremely low. It's well below the average. And one of the things that, interestingly, we know about being too fat versus being too light or having a BMI that's too low is that there are complications that can arise from that as well. So without question, we don't want to get too heavy, but we don't want to be too light either. So, and what's the final result from this article that you got? They're just concerned. They're a little concerned, but I don't think she's too upset with $250,000 in her pocket. So she's happy. She was the winner of the show.
She was the winner. Yeah,
got it. Now, one of the things I'd be interested in is where is she now? In other words, after the show is ended. All right, that was Fitness Nuts in the News. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back after this message from Wingate University.
Your extraordinary future begins at Wingate University with more than 35 undergraduate majors and graduate and professional programs in the health sciences, business, and education. Wingate University's enrollment has mushroomed and construction has skyrocketed in the past 2 decades. And Wingate is the 6th best value in the South, according to U.S. News & World Report. Most importantly, Wingate graduates get jobs. They're working all over the Carolinas and the U.S. Major in a great life at Wingate University.
Hi, and welcome back to the Fitness Doctor, the program where we address your exercise, nutrition, and overall health needs. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva, exercise physiologist in the School of Sports Sciences at Wingate University. Troy, what do we have for this segment?
Doc, for this segment, we have special in-studio guest Eric Wikstrom is still with us. More common fitness injuries, the social media breakdown, and the research minute.
Okay, let's get back to it. We're discussing the most common fitness-related injuries as reported by Men's Fitness Journal. In the first part of the show, we discussed just a couple of them. We talked about in fact, in order, they listed the most common ones. We talked about plantar fasciitis and ankle sprains. In fact, this was an informal study to a degree, and our in-house guest and actually expert would claim that actually that should be reversed. If nothing else, ankle sprain should be in the number one, because especially with your research, but what you've dealt with in 15 years of this profession.
Yeah, ankle sprains always seem to pop up the most common, especially when you get into to high school and collegiate athletes in particular. Weekend warriors, it might change a little bit, but ankle sprains is up there.
Got it. Now, just a little bit about our guest. He's a athletic trainer. Eric is from UNC-Charlotte, and despite what happened a few years ago, I still invited him to the show. When I was at Roanoke College, in my first year, I had looked at my bank account and I realized I had a couple extra dollars, right? And I was single, and so I bought a Porsche 911, and it was a unique color. It was ice green metallic. And a lot of I drove it regularly, and a lot of students saw it, and Eric was like a sophomore at the time. And this really addresses like his confidence in classes, even like exercise physiology, where every point on those exams is needed. The first question on the very next exam that I gave after I bought that car was, true or false, ice green metallic is a great color for an automobile. The entire class, which was maybe 15 students, said true, except for one individual who wrote false, and that was Eric. And of course, that was a pointer, not a point, but it shows where his confidence is, because not only did he get an A on that test, he got an A for the class, whereas everybody, even though they might have hated that color. And I asked him afterwards, and he said, "Oh no, I hate that color."
It wasn't my choice of color for a Porsche.
Now, your Porsche, the Porsche that you bought since then, is probably a completely different color, right?
Yeah, the 2000 Civic. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we call that a Porsche in some cases, right? All right, let's talk a little bit more about these injuries. But actually, first, let's do the social media info, Troy.
Yep, if you have a question regarding today's topic or would like to request a future topic, follow us on Twitter at Woo Fitness Doctor or like our page on Facebook, and always feel free to reach out to us via email at woofitnessdoctor@wingate.edu.
Did you mention Instagram there?
Yes, I did. Actually, no, I did not.
Okay.
We are also on Instagram. We got some good posts coming up, some good videos, so definitely check us out there. Same thing, Woo Fitness Doctor.
We got it all going on.
Always.
This is fantastic. All right. And one day you guys are going to explain this to me, what all this stuff means. Everything from email to Instagram.
I don't know if we'll get there one day. I don't know.
If I had the intelligence of Eric, I'd probably pick all this stuff up. All right, next on their list was what they referred to as an ACL sprain. Now, Eric, you would probably agree with me. These three letters are probably the most common to a football fan. Wouldn't you agree? Like at least an acronym that's related to injuries, ACL.
Yes, I would agree with that.
All right, let's talk about, first of all, what this stands for. Now, between the two of us, let's try to paint a clear picture to our viewer and listener. ACL stands for the anterior cruciate ligament. Now, in between the two major bones that come together at the knee, there's a couple ligaments that hold these two bones together. They support them.
That's right.
And the one that's in the front, the anterior one, is the one that comes into play and the one that is injured. What else can we add to this in painting this picture of where this particular ligament is? What else could you say about that?
Well, so it starts on the top, right, the femur.
Okay,
and
that's the upper leg bone.
That's the upper leg bone, the thigh bone. And it actually goes forward down to the tibia, the lower leg bone.
Yep, which is our shin, right?
This is your shin bone, that's right. So it tears, its primary job in the body is to prevent the shin bone from going or shifting forward from the thigh bone.
So it's to add stability to the knee.
That's right. And it crosses over what's called the PCL, or the posterior cruciate ligament, and those two form an X, hence the cruciate part. So they're responsible for holding the knee from sliding back and forth.
Okay. And when it says it sprains, as I mentioned earlier, there's usually some type of either a bad stretch or there's a small tear.
Well, I'd say typically, and you're seeing it on bottom line, it's torn.
Yeah.
It's completely ruptured, and that person's going to need surgery.
Yeah, and there's no exception to that, right?
There's a few. There's a few partial tears, and even in those cases, most of those, if they're elite athletes or competitive athletes, they're probably going to go get surgery.
And you learned how to do this test on whether the knee is unstable years ago, didn't you? And
Yeah,
you've probably done this test numerous times.
Yeah, there's several that you can do. The most common is the Lockmans, where you're grabbing the shin bone and you're kind of yanking it forward and back to see how much movement do you get relative to the thigh bone.
Now, as an athletic trainer, I would think that this is one of the most sensitive things because especially when you're dealing with athletes, people like at UNC-Charlotte, this is Division I basketball, Division I football now, smaller division, but still. And when you do this test, you probably don't want to hear or feel certain things that shows that it's unstable because this is an end to their season. In some cases, it's the end of their career, at least as they know it, right?
Yeah, you don't want to see that laxity or that motion that we get. And I've seen a lot of young athletic trainers, especially students, the first time they do that, their eyes will get all bug-eyed. And that's exactly what you don't want because the athlete's looking right at your face when that happens.
Because they know that they feel the instability and they know instinctively even though they've had some training, that something is wrong.
Right.
Yeah, got it. All right, if just a little sidestep here, this is Dr. John Acquaviva. I'm an exercise physiologist from Wingate University. You're listening to The Fitness Doctor on ESPN 730. And we're here talking with Eric Wikstrom, an athletic trainer from UNC-Charlotte, about injuries that are related to people who are active, athletes, or just people who work out. Troy, some social media info, and in fact, let's go to a question. I understand some people have been contacting us.
That's right, Doc. We have a question here from XO Becky 63, and she wants to know, I've heard of dynamic stretching. Is that better than traditional stretching?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the two. Traditional stretching, of course, is generally static in nature. The individual is still. Like the most common one is probably what's called the Houston stretch. The individual puts their 2 feet together, knees slightly bent, and they bend over and they're looking at their kneecaps and they're just trying to get a good back stretch, good hamstring stretch. Whereas dynamic stretching is where the individual is doing a form of exercise. They're moving in space somehow. How can we explain what dynamic stretching is?
It's really the way that a lot of strength coaches and physiologists are pushing their athletes to make the stretching more specific to the activities that they're going to do.
Let's use soccer as an example. Right. This is a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, so with soccer, right, you're going to have a lot of hip movements and hip flexion to be able to stop the ball, kick the ball,
whatever,
right, in a number of different positions. It's never going to come to exactly where you want it to at your feet.
Exactly.
So as you're warming up, they don't want you to just stretch those muscles in a static position. They actually want you to go through those extremes of motion to warm up your body exactly how you're going to have to use it.
Or at least most mimic how they're going to use it in
That's
the game.
right. So you're going to warm up the muscles how they should be. And it's really what it is. It's more of an active dynamic warm-up than it is an actual stretch.
And so a couple examples would be, one is where the individual puts their arm out and their hand, and then they keep their legs straight, and they do what's called a Frankenstein. And with their toe, they just bring their toe up to their hand, and they stick the other hand out, and then their other foot does that, and they just kind of march forward in this kind of awkward-looking movement, and just putting the muscles at the hip through that range of motion. What would be another example?
So if you think about goalies, so they might do lunges.
Yeah.
Actually doing quick lunges is a good way of stretching a lot of the lower extremity musculature to get it warmed up for an activity that they might be doing.
What does the research say about this? Do you talk about this in your classes in particular, the effectiveness of dynamic stretching, say, versus static?
Yeah, so it's not one of my particular classes, but within our curriculum, we certainly do. The more and more research looks to be the static stretching is effective at improving range of motion because you hold it for so long.
Sure.
But it's not necessarily the best at sport-specific warm-ups. It looks like the dynamic stretching might actually have a little bit of benefit for preventing injuries, more so than, say, your traditional
We like to hear
stretching.
that, right?
Yes.
Anybody in fact, that's all coaches need to hear, and they're like, I'm going to implement this. And soccer teams, even when they're youth, I've known them to go through a great deal of these stretches, sometimes as much as 10 or 15 minutes prior to starting their drills.
Yeah, and the great thing is it doesn't take any more time than a static stretching drill. In fact, it can be incorporated into pregame warm-ups and skills a lot easier. And
it simply makes sense. Like when you watch people go through these dynamic stretches, it simply makes sense because a lot of the movements mimic the actual sport that they're doing, as you mentioned. And so as you watch it, it's just kind of common sense on why it's been implemented. It's relatively new. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, last half dozen years or so. And you watch any game now, pregame that you go to, you're going to see the athletes doing this.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, let's get back to it. Let's talk about a couple other ones that are on here. A quad strain and a hamstring pull are on here. Let's talk about a hamstring pull. This is really just a kind of informal way of saying a hamstring strain, right? The hamstrings are a set of three muscles that do what's called knee flexion. And these especially come into play, for instance, when we run, because the foot hits the ground and then we bring the knee up in a flexion. And because there's a lot of tension on that muscle, it's just more likely that it's going to strain. It's going to go through some type of tear, right?
That's right. Yeah, a hamstring pulls, it's a strain. You're tearing some of the muscle fibers in there, and happens a lot when you do big, powerful accelerations or decelerations.
Okay.
And it's quite common to do, especially in people who lack flexibility.
And all you're dealing with athletes, and I know you've dealt with athletes playing a different range of sports. Is there a sport that you saw that's more common with than others?
Most common is hurdling in
Really?
track. Because they kick that leg out and they're really stretching out the hamstring in a very dynamic, forceful motion.
And so you've seen informally a lot more injuries there than you have in other.
Yeah, and you see it a lot in weekend warriors.
Of course,
because they're not warmed up. They haven't done anything for 5-6 days. They go out and they do something that they probably shouldn't, and there it goes.
We should have two different lists here. We should have just everyday injuries and then the ones for the weekend warrior, which might be a whole different list altogether.
It could be.
Yeah. All right, we got the research minute. We only got a few minutes left. What is this, Troy?
Yeah, it's now time for the research minute. This is a part of the show where the doc has done some additional research on today's topic within a recent article, and we'll post that on our social media. So, Doc, why don't you take it away?
Got it. This is the effectiveness of a neuromuscular and proprioceptive training program in preventing anterior cruciate ligament injuries in female athletes, a 2-year follow-up. Holy smokes. I could never have said that with all these words in front of me, without these words in front of me. Basically, what they determined was ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament, the one we just referred to just a few minutes ago. What they did is they just did a bunch of different training programs with them to see if they could actually prevent this from happening. And what they did was the intervention consisted of a wide range of things. For instance, there was education, stretching, strengthening, which we could assume was probably some type of resistance training, weight training, maybe something like that. Could have been bands, something like that. Plyometrics and sport-specific agility drills. So that actually encompasses a whole lot. Now, even though you haven't probably read this article, at least not in the last 10 minutes, right? But you'll probably read it before you go to bed tonight. How much of the training would you assume that they would do per day? 30 minutes maybe to prevent this?
Well, that's the big trick with implementing any of these programs is how much volume do they need? If you tell a coach, they need 30 minutes a day, that eats into practice time.
Got it, yeah.
There are some programs though that have been shown to be effective doing them in the off season.
Got it.
So you incorporate it into part of your resistance training or into part of your warm-ups, and they can still be very effective.
And the amazing thing about this is that during the season, because of this intervention, there was an 88% decrease in ACL injuries for those subjects. That's impressive, isn't it? I mean, if it was even half of that, you would say it would garnish conversation, but virtually all of them, 88%, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and you see that type of result pretty consistently across all these studies that have been done. You put particularly female athletes through a prevention study for ACL tears, and it works.
And one of the things that we should add here is it wasn't coincidental, so to speak, that they chose female athletes. Female athletes are far more likely to...
Yeah, anywhere from 2 to 9 times more likely to tear their ACL than males in the same sport. So women's soccer players, big increased risk.
And that's the best way to study it, isn't it?
Yes.
It's to study in the same sport.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's good stuff. We're going to post this eventually on one of those crazy things you talked about in social media. Folks, we want to thank our guest, Eric Wikstrom from UNC-Charlotte, for being here talking about sports-related injuries. And before we go, we just want to give that strong reminder. Folks, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. Please join us again next time on The Fitness Doc. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva.
What is Wingate? A thriving university nestled in a quiet community near Charlotte. Named 6th best value in the South by U.S. News & World Report. Leading the way in the health sciences with pharmacy, PA studies, and nursing. What is Wingate? Big enough to offer 22 NCAA sports. Small enough to attract the best and brightest in the world. What is Wingate? Wingate is you. Wingate University. Major in a great life.